Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. Today we've got another discussion video from the truck. I came out here today to do a little bit of review cutting, but we got a little bit of a storm rolling in. It's getting kind of windy and nasty out there right now, so we're gonna sit it out and see what happens, see if I get to do some review cutting here in a little bit. This video, though, is one that I've been wanting to make for a little while. We're gonna be talking about my knife review process, why I do what I do. Gonna explain what I do exactly, and I'm making this video for a couple of reasons. I've made videos on this topic before in the past. I've touched on it a little bit, but some of those are older videos. There's a lot of new people here since then, so you know, for people that might be curious at, I guess, getting an idea of how I operate, this could be an interesting video for them. But I'm also making this video because I am sick and tired of getting comments from people who have zero media literacy, or perhaps the attention span of an ADHD gerbil, commenting under my videos saying things like, "Oh, you didn't do this," or "Why don't you do that?" When I do those things, or if I don't do those things, I have explained why. This is gonna be a video that I can just link to people who give me those comments. And speaking of which, I am gonna make a video here pretty soon talking about media literacy and how it's dying in today's day and age. But if you're someone who clicks on a video and can't watch more than a single minute of a video, number one, either don't comment on it because you're lacking. Most of my videos are longer than 20 minutes. Most of my long form videos are longer than 20 minutes. If you can only stick around for a minute or so, you're missing the vast majority of the video. Maybe don't comment because you probably don't know what you're talking about. Number two, if you just have to comment, or you just think something is lacking, but you cannot be bothered to watch the entire video, YouTube has this feature now under all videos where you can like ask YouTube's little AI bot questions about the video. So you can go on there and be like, "Oh, does Gideon ever talk about what steel this knife is made out of?" And it will tell you not only that I do mention that, but it'll give you a timestamp where you can go and see where I talk about that feature. I am not a huge fan of YouTube's AI assistants. That's another video topic for another day. I'm not a huge fan of AI in general, but we're not going to touch on that too much. But yeah, if you are someone who's just, you know, has to say something, and you want to just make sure you don't look like an idiot before you say it, at least double check with the AI to see if you're about to comment on something that I've already discussed in the video. Because I do get a lot of videos where people are like, "Oh, why did you never mention the blade steel? You know, oh, this is a horrible review. You didn't even say what the blade steel was." Yeah, I did. I did. I mentioned the blade steel in every single video. And how do I know that? Because I have a pattern. I have a format that I follow for my reviews. Now, you know, it's not necessarily a very rigid, robust script, but I have a pattern that I like to follow. And as you guys know on this channel, we're not the most professional, but I do hit on every single point in all my videos. So that's the first thing I want to address, is the structure of my knife reviews. My knife reviews typically consist of an intro, review cutting, pros, cons, and a closing. Those are the 5 main segments of my knife review process. And I think something that I might start doing, I used to do this in the past and I didn't see that it made much difference, but maybe I'll start doing it again, is doing timestamps and chapters in every single knife upload. I typically do chapters for like a lot of my extremely long discussion videos, but I stopped doing chapters on knife reviews just because to me it didn't seem like anyone was using them anyways, but maybe I'll start doing that again if people are interested. Each of these 5 segments has a couple of different parts. So the introduction, what is in the introduction? The introduction to all my videos is typically between 1.5 minutes and 3 minutes long. And in the introduction, I, number one, announce, or I guess, yeah, announce The knife that we're going to be taking a look at, this will start, we're looking down on the desktop. There's the knife. I say what its name is, what company it's from. If I have to thank anyone for that knife, I try to say that in the intro, like, oh, this company sent me this knife, or hey, this viewer sent me this knife. Or I'll just disclose where I got it from. I bought this knife from blah, 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 blah. Get that out of the way. The next thing I do is a blade length measurement. We sometimes do overall measurements, but I most of the time just stick to a blade length measurement for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I think that is the most important measurement because of legal reasons, right? That's a very important thing to know. Is this knife going to be legal to carry in my jurisdiction? And blade length is typically the standard that most legal restrictions go by. So we do a sharpened edge measurement and an overall blade measurement. I don't always do overall knife dimensions, overall knife measurements, because I think a lot of times, like when it comes to the handle, I talk about that stuff more when we're talking about the ergos. And I think that's more important than an overall length. I care more about blade length, knowing the blade length measurement than the overall length. After I do blade length measurements, we do size comparisons. I bring out, typically the first things we start with are the Rat 1 and 2, compare against those. Then I have my Civivis, the Praxis, and the Elementum 2, compare against those. And then my USA made comparisons, the Spyderco PM2 and the Benchmade Bug Out. If I'm reviewing a fixed blade, I sometimes cut out some of the folders and I'll compare the fixed blade against some other fixed blade knives that are in a similar genre or just very well known. The Gerber Strong Arm is one of my go-tos for fixed blade size comparisons, and the Cold Steel SRK is my other go-to. And then I have a couple other knives. Sometimes I throw in extra size comparisons if I think they're relevant. If a knife is, for example, like part of a series of knives, if I have other members of that series, I'll compare against them. For example, if I'm reviewing a CGRB Pyrite that comes out with a new blade shape, I'll compare against the Drop Point, the original Pyrite, so you guys can see that. Sometimes I'll do inter-brand comparisons if I feel like they're necessary, like, oh, this knife feels like the brand is releasing it to be kind of in the same family as these other models they make, and I'll bring those out and compare against those. After size comparisons, I talk about our materials. Every single time. Every single time. I'll tell you what the blade steel is. I'll tell you what the blade shape is. I'll tell you what the handles are made out of. I'll tell you what the pocket clip is made out of. I'll tell you what the liners are made out of, what kind of lock it has, and what the pivot system is, and the deployment method. And then I close the knife and I say, let's go cut some stuff. And we cut to review cutting. Now, review cutting is more than just cutting, and I'm going to make an entire video. Probably it's going to come out next week. I've got to make an entire video explaining what I do with review cutting, why I do it. Yeah, that storm is moving in. You can see the Franklin. Well, you can't really see the Franklins, but back there they are disappearing in clouds. Yeah, El Paso's getting a lot of rain right now. But My review cutting segment is made up of a couple of different parts. The first thing that we usually start with is an overview of the ergonomics of a knife. And again, with my review cutting, this is the camera's facing me. I typically come out to a somewhat scenic area. I set up in the back of my truck, and we talk about the knife. And the first thing I start with is ergos. Whether it's a fully knife or a fixed blade, we talk about the ergonomics. What I like about the ergos, what I don't like about the ergos. We talk about how it fits my hand, how I think it'll fit other people's hands, the materials that they're using, the handles, this, that, and the other. Then if it's a folding knife, we typically talk about the action next. If it's a fixed blade, we skip right to carry. If it's a folder, after I talk about the action, we talk about the carry. Folding knives, I put it in and out of my pocket to show you guys how it goes in and out. I talk about how much room it takes up in your pocket. I talk about whether or not the pocket clip has the appropriate amount of tension, whether or not it's grabby in and out, all the good stuff that comes with carry. If it's a fixed blade, I show you what the sheath is made out of. I explain whether it's like a friction fitted sheath, whether it's got a secondary snap, the different methods of carry. Does it come with tech lock or something similar? Does it have MOLLE compatibility? Does it have slots and holes that you can set up secondary carry with? Do I prefer it vertical carry, scout style? How have I been carrying this knife? And then I'll show it to you guys on my belt or however I carry it. If it's a next knife around my neck or whatever. And talk about my personal feelings on how it carries. And after carry, we go on to my review cutting. Now, the biggest thing to note about my review cutting, about the review cutting segments of my videos, is this is not testing. Okay? Review cutting in my knife reviews is not testing. It's a demonstration. It's a demonstration. This is a visual way for me to communicate a knife's performance to you guys. And I do this because I could sit down to film a review and just say, oh yeah, this knife cuts great, or oh yeah, this knife doesn't cut well at all. I could just say that, but I think it's far more effective and impactful if I show you how it cuts, if I show you whether or not it's a good cutter or a bad cutter. And I have a couple of different mediums that I use. The first thing we do is we cut cardboard. And I talk about how it cuts the cardboard. Normally we'll talk a little bit, we'll use the cardboard to kind of demonstrate how the blade shape affects the cutting performance. So we'll do some long passes through cardboard, and then I'll typically do like utility cuts down on my cutting board. And yeah, that's kind of the main point of the cardboard, is to talk about how the blade shape performs. It also, is a commentary on like the geometry to some degree, the ergonomics, how they affect things, but mainly it's about the blade shape. Do you get a lot of edge to work with? Do you get not a lot of edge to work with? Can you get to that tip very easily or not? That's what the cardboard does. Next, we move on to my plastic rope, and we do two sections or two different cuts with this rope. First thing we do is just a pull through. And this is kind of a demonstration of like the geometry of the apex of the edge. And then the next thing we do is we put the rope down on the cutting board, and I just give 3 pushes at different sections of the rope with the knife. And this is kind of a demonstration of how, I guess, robust the knife is behind the apex, as well as how the makers have balanced an acute apex with maybe thicker geometry. A lot of times thin knives don't do well at this demonstration. That's not a bad thing, it's just they don't have a whole lot of weight behind them. Thicker knives tend to do pretty good. With the rope pull, serrated knives do amazing. Other knives can struggle. It's not that they're doing it wrong and that makes them inferior. It's just some knives are better at some things than others. And then the last thing we do is a pool noodle cut. There's one of my pool noodles right there, where I cut 3 times through the foam. And this is a demonstration of the geometry. Are the grinds even? A lot of times if a knife is misground to one side or another, it will leave wavy cuts through the foam. Sometimes if a knife is too thick behind the edge, instead of biting in cleanly with just light pressure, it bends and deforms the pool noodle, and then it starts to like smush it and tear it rather than just slicing cleanly through. Sometimes if you have a knife that has like a very, very fine, thin apex, but then it gets thick very, very quickly, that affects the way it cuts the pool noodle. It'll cut nice to begin with, and then it'll start to just wedge it apart, And so all of these different mediums that I cut through are just ways for me to show you guys what I have noticed about the knife's performance through my time EDCing it. And we'll come back to that here in a second. When I'm done with review cutting, we cut back to the desktop and I talk about the pros, what I like about the knife. When I'm finished talking about what I like about the knife, I talk about what I don't like about the knife. And then we close. And part of my closing, my closing has a couple different parts. I normally start off my closing by talking about how much the knife costs. Unless the price is like a huge pro or a huge con, I save speaking about the price until my closing. I'll tell you all the features of the knife, and then I'll talk about the price, whether I think that's justified or not. I mentioned the price, and then after I talk about the price, I explain whether or not I recommend the knife. Do I recommend this knife? Yes or no. Sometimes it's like a soft yes, like, yeah, it's a cool knife if you really want it. I think I could recommend it, but it's not something that I would necessarily recommend to everybody. Or, yeah, this is a knife that's not really for me, but if you really like the aesthetics, or if you're into the kind of genre this knife represents, it might be for you. You know, there's different levels of, you know, synthesizing my thoughts on a knife. And then after I've talked about whether or not I recommend the knife, I thank my channel members. I ask you guys to like, comment, and subscribe, and then we're done with the video. That is how every single one of my knife reviews goes. That's the format I follow. I came up with it fairly early on. I have added to my knife review format throughout the years. I've also subtracted some things, but what I've got right now, I think is something that I'm happy with. I think I cover a lot of good information, and I think I give it in a very thorough manner. Is it quick? No. Again, most of my knife reviews are 20 minutes or longer, but it's because I feel like I have a lot to say. Now, what is that? That's my process for filming reviews. That's my process for giving you guys information. What is my actual review process? Well, a lot of people ask what my testing is, and I say I don't really do testing. I don't really do dedicated testing. I sometimes do, and I used to do a little bit more testing. Like I've done strength testing, I've done steel testing on this channel, but those videos are kind of rare. They were more common in the early days, but as I've, I guess, evolved as a YouTuber, those kind of videos have become a little more rare, and I typically only save them for knives that I really think need that kind of video. You know, doing extra testing for a knife might be something that I reserve for like if I just think it has good entertainment value, like beating the heck out of a cold steel folder. That's always fun. I love doing it. People love watching it. Sometimes I do that. If there's like controversy about a steel, I might do some steel testing with it. There's a couple of videos I'm working on because people have requested like comparisons between two steels. So there are exceptions where I do stuff like that, but I do not do like dedicated like testing as part of my review for every single knife. What I do instead is I just carry the knife and use it day to day. And I carry a knife until I feel like I know enough about it to film a review. And the period of time that I spend with a knife is different for every single knife. Is that unfair? Is that like a is that a inconsistency? I don't really think so. I don't really think so. For example, here's a knife I'm getting ready to review. I did not carry this knife very much. I carried it for 3 days in a row, and then I've carried it on and off for a little bit, but I'm ready to review this knife already. And why is that? Well, because there were some big issues that jumped out to me about this knife very early on that, to me, have kind of solidified my my opinions on this knife. Number one, the action is very poor because the flipper tab is positioned so low. That's something I noticed right away. Another thing is you can't really, maybe you can, but you can see that big chip in the edge. That's because the blade hits one of the stop pins or one of the standoffs back here. Those are some big issues that have, I guess have kind of compounded to result in a knife where I don't think I need to carry it anymore. I know enough about this knife. It cuts very well. This is a double hollow ground blade. This part's hollow ground, and so is this part up here. It cuts very well. Very, very thin, slicey knife. The ergos are pretty good. One thing I don't like about this knife, though, is because this spine is hollow ground, putting your thumb up here is a little bit painful. I've carried this knife enough to realize that, oh yeah, it has some significant issues, and there we go. I'm ready to carry this knife. Sometimes a knife is so good that I'm ready to review it after just a little bit of time spent with it. But this is a little more rare. For example, the Benchmade Mini Presidio. I've been carrying this knife a ton. I love this knife. This is a very, very good knife, and that became apparent to me within like a week of carrying it. But I'm not ready to do the review with this knife yet. I am still carrying it a lot. And part of that is just because I really, really like the knife, so I want to carry it as much as possible. And as a knife reviewer, sometimes after I get done reviewing a knife, it gets to be a while before I carry it again because I have so many things I need to carry and review. But the other thing too is sometimes when I like a knife a lot, I want to do a little more with it. I want to do extra. Now this knife has already gotten that treatment. This knife has gone on a backpacking trip with me. It's gone on lots and lots of hiking trips and camping trips already. I've been putting this knife through its paces for sure because it's a good knife and because I like it and because I realized I liked it so early on. I really want to push it as far as I can, just in case there is an issue that might arise later on. I don't think that's going to be the case, but sometimes, I'll just do a little bit of extra. So yeah, the amount of time that I spend with a knife varies from knife to knife. And sometimes that can be a bad thing, like with that Sarge. Sometimes, like this Cold Steel Verdict, I'm pretty much ready to review this knife. I've only had it for about 2 weeks at this point, but I've been carrying it a lot since then. In fact, this knife has been my most carried knife in addition to the Benchmade. I think I'm already ready to review it, and that's just because it's so simple and because I've already reviewed so many Cold Steel knives. I kind of know what to expect from them as a brand, and this fits very much into their usual MO, right? So I think I already understand this knife well enough to review it. Of course, there's some knives that are just very confusing that I have to carry for a very, very long time before I review. Here's a great example of one of those knives. This is a knife that I've had for years, and I have not reviewed it yet. Oh, shoot. Please tell me I brought that knife. I thought I put it in my knife review bag. I have my knife review bag sitting here. Oh, come on. Did I not? Oh, I was supposed to have. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I left it at home. Oh, shoot. That would be a shame. That would be a tragedy. But I think that's exactly what happened. Nope, there it is. My knife review bag is huge. I have a lot of knives I'm trying to get through. Also, I'm going to roll down the window real quick because it's hot as balls in here. Average getting this video. This is the Civivi Aratra. I've had this knife for like 2 years at this point, and I have been using it over that time. Not consistently, like this has been kind of on and off, but I haven't reviewed this knife yet. I'm going to get it reviewed this year, but the reason I haven't reviewed it yet is just because this knife is confusing to me. It's very, very confusing to me, and I haven't really figured out what I feel about it. I've taken this knife backpacking with me several times. It works great as like a backpacking hatchet, but like I took it with me a couple times just kind of as a joke, and it worked like as a functional tool. But is this something that I would always take backpacking with me? No, probably not. And that's kind of where my experience with this knife has kind of ended. I've used it as like a food prep knife around camp, and it's okay, but not like great enough to make me want to use it all the time. Anyway, this is a knife that I've had for years. I've used it on and off quite often, but I do not have my thoughts together on it yet. So it's been taking me a long time to review this knife. It's a confusing one, but I'm really, really going to dedicate some time this year to finally getting it reviewed. But yeah, that's how I work. I don't do specific testing. I think it's a lot more useful to just use a knife day to day, right? And knives get used differently. Like, an EDC knife, I take this to work with me. I use this around the house. I take this with me day to day. That's awesome. Sometimes my knives that I carry will be like an EDC Plus, like the Benchmade Mini Presidio. This goes to work with me a lot. This goes around town with me. This is an EDC knife, but this is also kind of an adventure folder. This is a knife that I take with me out in the backcountry quite often and put it to put it to use with some, maybe not like abusive use testing, but some hard use applications. And, is the Kershaw sequence going to see the same kind of use that this knife has seen? Probably not, to be completely honest with you. Probably not. That's just because they're different knives, and I think that they fit into different roles. I mentioned, hiking, backpacking, and things like that. That's something I do a lot. I do a lot of camping. So something like the Cold Steel SRK, this is a knife that I've built shelters with. I built tons and tons of fires with. That's regular use for a knife like this. And that's how I use this knife. It took me a long time to review this knife too, though, because I really wanted to get some of that use on camera. And for me, it's just kind of hard to film myself when I'm out camping. Like I like to have dedicated time for filming something. And so it took me a while to get enough footage collected with this knife for me to be satisfied with giving it a review. But, as far as just using it, yeah, this was going out into the mountains with me all the time, being put to a ton of use as part of my review process. And I think that that is a good way for me to review knives, is I just use them as I think they're meant to be used and see how they hold up. If I took a Kershaw sequence out and was like batoning it through tree stumps and throwing it at walls and putting it in a vise and hanging stuff off the handle, that could be fun, that could be entertaining. But at the end of the day, I don't really think that that's like if I were to break this knife in half with a sledgehammer, what useful information does that give you? None. However, if this knife suffers a catastrophic failure while I'm breaking down my recycling, that is something of note. That is something noteworthy, because that is a task that this knife should be able to handle no problem. And if it can't do that, then that's a big problem. So I use knives as I think they're intended to be used, and talk about how they performed in their respective roles. And I think that's how a review should be conducted. If I was a tech reviewer and I was reviewing, like, I don't know, AirPods, and I'm like, all right, so in order to review these AirPods, I'm going to go scuba diving with them in and see what happens. It's like, oh my gosh, shock horror, one of them fell out and it's lost out in the Pacific Ocean, probably choking some poor sea turtle to death. And the other one just fizzled out and died while I was, 50 feet underwater. Is that a good review of AirPods? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be useful or usable information for any of you guys. And so that's why I've, I just kind of use my knives and talk about my experience using them. Can this lead to like oversight? Yeah, I guess it could in some ways. For example, like, I don't know, maybe if a company's not doing their heat treat quite right, maybe I could miss that from my day-to-day use. But even then, I don't really think I would, because even though I'm not specifically testing that steel, if the heat treat is really that bad, I'll notice it. And let's say, even if a knife has like a subpar heat treatment, where it's not as good as it could be, but it's good enough for EDC tasks, especially if it's like a $50 budget knife, all I could do is give you guys my experience with it. Hey, this knife performed okay for my EDC tasks, and if it performs all right for my EDC tasks, it'll probably perform all right for yours. There's a lot of things I used to care about more. Like one of the things I've cut out of my reviews is I used to measure the behind the edge thickness of every single knife I reviewed. I have stopped doing that. I don't even mention behind the edge thickness anymore. I don't care about behind the edge thickness. I really don't give a damn about it, because I realized that it's not that important. I talk a lot about geometry, but behind the edge thickness is not everything. And there are some knives that are 22 thousandths behind the edge that cut better than knives that are 13 thousandths behind the edge, right? It comes down to the practical application of the tool. And I've seen that so many times while I've been carrying a knife where it's like on paper, you would, if I just told you, yeah, this knife is 13 thousandths behind the edge, so it's better than this knife that's 25 thousandths behind the edge. You know, that's using the numbers to justify on paper this should be better. But then you get to carrying them and you're like, oh, actually, this knife that's 25 thousandths is a much, much better EDC knife than this other one. And that comes down to a lot of complex features. Maybe one of them has a better handle. Good ergos helps your knife cut a lot better. Maybe the knife that's 13 thousandths behind the edge is 13 thousandths behind the edge because it has a, short but very thin hollow grind. That's awesome. But maybe once you get, if you're cutting through a material and you pass that hollow grind and get up to the full thickness of the blade, maybe it's just that transition is a little bit jarring and it doesn't cut as good as maybe the knife that's 25 thousandths behind the edge, but has a full flat grind that glides through material a lot nicer. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to knife performance. And so just saying, oh, this knife is so many thousandths behind the edge. Crap. We're not editing that out. Isn't that useful as a metric? I think it's much better to say, here's how this knife performed for me, rather than just being like, here's how this knife would be expected to perform. One of the few, how do I say this? Not that anecdotes or like personal experience is better than like qualitative data. But the great thing about knife reviews is I'm not the only guy doing this. So you can compile a lot of info from a lot of different people and be like, okay, was Gideon's knife just a dud? Was that like a, individual variation? Or is this knife been performing poorly for other people or whatever? That's a whole other tangent we're not going to get on right now. But basically, I think that just carrying a knife and using it day to day is a much simpler and honestly more honest way for me to review knives. Knife testing is hilariously unscientific a lot of times. There are scientific ways to do it, but especially on YouTube, a lot of it is hard to qualify, I think. And so just using a knife and then talking about how it performed while I was using it, I think is the best way for me to stay honest and I guess just honest about my review process and what I think about a knife. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other rabbit holes we're gonna dive down on this conversation. I don't want to make this video too long. We're already at over half an hour, so I'm probably gonna cut it short pretty quickly. But yeah, that's how I run my channel. This kind of turned into a discussion on why I don't do specifically testing, but that's a big part of how I run my channel, why I do what I do, my methodology, my thought process behind my methodology. I do have a way that I like to do things, and I stick to it. I think this is the way that works best for me. Now, it can be kind of frustrating because, Gideon unboxed this knife 5 months ago. Where's the review? Well, I haven't had enough time with the knife. I'm still trying to get my thoughts together on the knife. And sometimes it's a mix of I had to carry the knife for a long time, and also I just got too busy to do my review, cutting it, and all my stuff about the knife. But I want to give every knife that I review, I want all my reviews to be structured similarly so that it's useful as a point of comparison. Why is one knife better than another knife in Gideon's opinion? Well, you can watch the review for both knives, and because he has the same format for both reviews, you can see exactly what the difference was between these knives. So, to me, that's very, very useful. I think it's also a good way to give just solid information without being pedantic or especially speaking on things that I have no authority to speak on. Right? I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on different steels, and again, back during the early days of my channel, back when I was cowboying, I did a lot more steel testing. But I don't do as much of that stuff anymore because, again, there's so much nuance, and because because if a knife performs well for me, that's all I have to say as a reviewer is this worked for me. Here's why. Here's how. This did what I needed all my EDC tasks to do. This did all my EDC tasks that I needed it to do. You guys get what I'm saying. But yeah, anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Big shout out to my channel members at the Cowboy level. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there's a link down below. As for the rest of you hooligans, if you enjoyed this video, leave it a like, comment below, and subscribe. And until next time, I've been Gideon. Adios.